everyone, this is CricketSong with Lunar Wisdom, and this video is going to be a book review. I'm going to be talking about and sharing with you this book I finished reading about a couple of weeks ago. The title is Magick Where You're At, and the author is Gianna Cicchelli. Now, Gianna has a YouTube channel, a website, and I'll put all that wonderful information, links, in the information section of this video so you can find her. Gianna is a YouTuber I've been watching on and off for a few years. She's been on YouTube for quite a while. Maybe not as long as I have, but almost as long. And she identifies herself as a witch shaman. On the back of the book, I'm going to read you a little bit about her. She is a sociology professor, an artist, and a professional witch and shaman. She holds a master's degree from CSU Fullerton, where she studied witchcraft and shamanism from a sociological perspective. She's been trained as a high priestess of an eclectic Wicca tradition and as a healer in the Peruvian Quiro shamanic tradition. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. She's traveled to Peru, Italy, and Costa Rica to work with shamanic practitioners and participate in sacred ceremonies. Her goal is to help heal people from their trauma and to teach them how to live magically no matter their religious belief system. And that is really, in a nutshell, what this book is about. It's a non-fiction book, and it really helps the reader to understand the concepts of magic from whatever spiritual place they are, whatever religion they are immersed in. She believes that you do not have to shift or change your spirituality in order to understand and use magic. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to shift the camera so we can take a look at the book, and I'd like to go through the book with you and share some of my thoughts and some of the information that can be found in Gianna's book. You can find this book on Amazon. That's where I purchased it, and I'll put a link to that in the information section as well. I highly recommend this book. I was pleasantly surprised about it. I always liked Gianna's content, but looking at the book, the artistic style isn't something I would normally be drawn to. But because I spent time watching her videos, I loved her energy, I still do, and I really resonated with a lot of the information that she shared, but there was enough of a difference in our spiritual practice which really enticed me to continue to listen and learn more. So let's look inside the book together, shall we? Okay, so the first thing about the book is it's rather big. It is as big as a piece of paper, like 8.5 by 11, and I already showed you the back. So Gianna, let's open the book. So it is rather big, and I didn't at first understand why she chose to have the book be so big. But as we work through it, you'll see why. Because Gianna is an artist, as well as a really great writer here, she fills, the cover is definitely something she drew, and there's a lot of little illustrations within the book, which is why I feel she has chosen the book to be such a large 8.5 by 11, because some of her drawings are full pages. So I feel like that's why that's that. But let's look at the table of contents here. So we have the preface, the first chapter. It starts here: shaman, witch, and other attempts at labeling, spirit guiding, magic, training your thoughts and words, power, ancestors, dreams and initiations, power objects, animal spirit guides, shadow animals, healing, plant medicine and altered state of consciousness, bad magic, insights, glossary, suggested reading, and references. So it's chock full of information. It's over 204 pages, but again, the pages are pretty big. The text is really easy to read too. So it's a large text with spaces in between, you know, it's double spaced, so it's easy to read. I mean, like see and read, it's easy to read too. So chapter 1 is, it starts here, and it seriously does. She talks about magic, where you go to get a magical experience. And this is what I'm talking about. When you go through the chapter, a lot of chapters, if not every chapter, has an illustration. I think every single illustration that are full pages have words too. So honestly, when I first started reading the book, I would just flip past these pages. Because again, to be totally honest, this sort of art doesn't appeal to me. It generally doesn't appeal to me. So the first few chapters I just flipped by. I really hardly paid any attention to the illustration. And then for some reason I stopped, and I don't remember why, but I started reading the illustration. And I said to myself, well, and then I went back and read all the other illustrations that I skipped and realized there are definitely messages or points, important points that she made within each of the illustrations. It's a wonderful teaching tool. I mean, some people work well with images, other people work well with words. This is a combination, and it even makes the words look like art. So I began to appreciate what Gianna was doing with the art, and it gave me a greater understanding. And then once I paid attention, I felt like I was gaining so much more. Not only of the information she was sharing, but the energy that she was sharing with me. So I began getting a greater appreciation for the artwork. And I almost, part of me wants to go in and start coloring it with my colored pencils now, because I enjoy coloring books. But then part of me is like, no, that's defacing the book. But I feel like if I were to do that, it would put my energy into something that Gianna has gifted me. So I might just do that. If I do, I'll share it with you in the future. So in each of these chapters, well, not in the first chapter, so then chapter 2 is beginnings, how I came to understand magic. Throughout the book, Gianna shares a lot of her personal stories, her personal experiences with what she is discussing. Because she does not present herself as an expert. She presents herself as someone who has practiced magic, who understands magic, and who wants to share magic with others. So I really appreciate the fact that she includes a lot of personal stories within this book, and I really enjoy that. So she goes over expectations and the beginning, you know, it began for me as a thirst. So she really shares her personal experiences within the information that she's sharing about magic and how to integrate magic into your own life, regardless of where you're at. So starting with chapter 3, she has teachings, or she has things she shares, lessons, whatever you want to call them, and then she has exercises. So within this chapter, I can't even remember, was this Shaman, Witch, and Other Attempts at Labeling. Within this chapter, actually, I lied. It's not in chapter 3. It must be in chapter 4. Spirit guiding. In chapter 4, so this talks about spirit guides. What I want to show you is on page 54, she has exercises. This is the first exercise in the book, and there are plenty others to follow. There's about 13 lessons or exercises within the book. Some of the chapters have more than one, but there are 13 altogether. And this one is listening to the spirits. So you learn about the spirit guides and allies, whatever you want to call the spirit guides, the spiritual entities that you work with within your spirituality. So within chapter 4, you'll learn about that, and then she'll give you an exercise so that you can apply what you just read about into your own practice if that's something that you are drawn to. So here on the chapter on magic, she talks about what magic is and her own experiences with magic. And spells, she talks about spells in this chapter. And then on page Crossroads, what the crossroads are, on page 72, she has an exercise in magic, and actually this exercise I really enjoyed. I liked this, where you take a piece of jewelry and you make a piece of jewelry, and she talks about how she's done this. You make a piece of jewelry and then you empower it with your own magic, your own energy. So she step by step on how to do that. Following that, she talks about shamanic magic, and then on page 75 she has an exercise in shamanic magic, which I found to be interesting as well. She talks about blowing into stones, and she talks about not crystals, but actual stones that you find outside. Perhaps it might be a crystal that you find, but it doesn't have to be. And I really resonated with this because I have a handful of stones that I've found on vacations and trips and things like that I don't necessarily work in my practice, but I hold them, and they have a special place in my home. And I talk about this as my stones because I don't really resonate with crystals and too much. I only use quartz crystal. So when I read this, I'm like, this is really interesting to me. It's something I resonate with. And after reading this, I think I might start incorporating the use of these stones, I guess, in a shamanic way in my own practice. And I would never have considered myself a shaman in any sense. So then the next chapter is Training Your Thoughts and Words. Totally appreciated this chapter as well. And in this, I really like this this dragon here. This illustration of this dragon really caught my attention. In this, she has an exercise on page 86 of exercise in words, which I appreciated as well. Power is chapter 7. A lot of these illustrations again here. There was no exercise in chapter 7, but this brings us to chapter 8. This was my favorite chapter, discussing the ancestors. They're always speaking. Basically, we just have to listen. I really enjoyed this chapter. This was my favorite chapter. She talks about her own experiences again throughout the entire book. Ancestor activity. So this is the activity that you are given. So some of the things are labeled exercises, some of the things are labeled activities. So this is the ancestor activity. It goes on to page 106. And then that brings us to chapter 9, Dreams and Initiations. And she talks about her own initiation and prophetic dreams that she's had. And then she has a dream exercise on page 115. And this continues, power objects. This was another interesting, I actually like this is one of my favorite illustrations. And you probably notice it has a lot more words than illustrations, which is probably why I enjoyed it. But I really enjoyed the concept of power objects. And again, she talks about the stones in here, and that might be why I really liked this chapter. But she has an exercise in using stones, and that goes on to page 129. And then she talks about animal spirit guides. So in the previous chapter about spirit guides, it didn't really incorporate the animal aspect. It was just, like human type spirit guides. So she talks about spirit guides, animal spirit guides in this one. She talks about the difference between a totem and a different type of animal, or animal spirit guides as opposed to a totem. And then she talks about shadow animals, which is a concept I never considered until I read about this. And it makes perfect sense. I don't know why I never considered it, but maybe it's just something I didn't label in the same way. Then she has shadow animal spirit guide exercise making a shadow animal vision board, an animal spirit guide exercise in this chapter. So there's more than one exercise in this one. Chapter 12 is about healing, all about the modalities of healing, having therapy sessions, her experiences with such. She does do healing in a specific tradition. She talks about tarantula magic. Never heard of it until I read in here. And then she has a healing exercise for you to do. Chapter 13 is plant medicine and altered state of consciousness. And imbibing plant medicine. And then she talks about her ayahuasca ceremony. I can't even pronounce it. The ceremonies that she's experienced. And then she has altered state of consciousness exercises 1, 2, and 3. So these were really interesting. I've done these type of exercises before I even read about her suggestion. And they're really helpful. So, I mean, they really help you be able to get into an altered state of consciousness. The first one is really about drumming. The second one is using mugwort. I've used mugwort as well to get into a altered state of consciousness. And then the third one is using sound. I believe it's vocal sounding, sort of like, she talked about using hum or sort of like mantra chanting, which I've done numerous times. That really gets me into that place. Chapter 14 is about bad magic, really talking about like malediction type stuff. And she has a really personal experience in here, which this was fascinating. This really captivated me, and I found it to be quite interesting. And she talks about the power within your magic. And her exercise at the end of this chapter is a kindness exercise. Chapter 15 is just insights. It's her own personal insights in regards to living a magical life. And that is the end of, oh wait, it continues. And that's the end of the book, other than her glossary of terms. If you're not familiar with some of the terms that she uses in the book, she has a list of suggested reading, about 15 different books, The Alchemist being one. And there was another one, I want to read The Red of His Shadow. I guess that was The Witch's Dream. The Book of Shadows by Phyllis Court. And then the references that she's used within the book. Like I said, this is a wonderful book. I guess I wanted to, the illustrations, the last thing, the illustrations that I really enjoyed. I have a few of them, the ones that really spoke to me. The one on page 25, I know it's not a full page illustration, but this one really drew my attention. Page 25, page 113, I think I already shared with you, but I will share with you again. Oh, I didn't. The one on dreams, this one really caught my attention as well. Page 120 and 125. I know one of these is the power objects. Yeah, this one is one of my favorites. And then the one on page 125. There is no one on page 125. Oh, it was just 25. 189 was the last one. Page 189, really. Oh, the dragonfly. Yes. The one on insights. Those are the illustrations that really called to me. So, Magick Where You're At. I really enjoyed this book. I really think it's a wonderful book for anybody in any spiritual path that is interested in harnessing the power of magic, understanding what magic is, and really living a magical life, regardless of what spiritual path you're following. And again, if you haven't subscribed to Gianna's YouTube channel, you should check it out. And you really get her voice from her videos into a book. This is really, when I read this, I could hear her speaking to me as if it was a video. So I really encourage you to check out this book, and I'm going to see if I can get her on an episode of The Sacred Circle, because I'd love to discuss this book with her more. So anyways, until next time, love you.